What's up, nerds? Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a book from a property that y'all may have heard of. I'm not sure. It's a little bit obscure. It's from the Spawn universe, because today we're going to be talking about The Scorched #1. So, if you've been following my channel, I've been covering the majority of stuff having to do with the Spawn universe. Not all of it. There are a few things that I haven't been making videos for the main Spawn book. I think I didn't make one for Spawn Universe. There are a few things here and there that I haven't made videos on, but I'm keeping up with pretty much all of it because it's Spawn as a character, as I've mentioned many times before. He's a character I've loved the majority of my life at this point. So there's no reason for me not to talk about this one too, and it's a thick book. I'm not gonna lie about that. Like, there's a lot going on in here. But anyway, we're starting out here where we're gonna do this whole thing where we kind of like we're dropped into the middle of like the bigger problem as these spawns are kind of like gathered together, and we can see where they're basically protecting these two girls back there. So it's kind of setting us up for the big conflict, like I said, where we see Redeemer is outside, and he basically tells them like, yeah, I think the owners of the building are here to evict us and shit, so we're gonna have to go now. So we see where Jessica, she's basically she spawn, and if I can manage to get any of these words out, we're going to be cooking with some gas here. Anyway, we see where she takes the girls. She's like, all right, yeah, we're going to get out through the back window and shit. She has them jump, and they all kind of like escape together. And so we go from there. Like I said, this was all just a setup. And now it's talking about like, okay, but how did all of these spawns come to be together in the same place, working in this one place in Russia and shit? So we start out by going back, what was it, 3 weeks, I think it was? Let's see. No, it was a week earlier. Near the Gate of Wolves in Chechnya, Spawn, which is Al Simmons, the regular one, wanted this to be a quiet, covert mission. Instead, She Spawn invited some big hitters to come along to the Russian HQ for Psalms 137 military division, which, if you've been keeping up with my reviews or just been reading King Spawn, you know that's that like cult that Al has basically been trying to like investigate and see what's up with them. So they're here at their headquarters where we can see the like their leader or whatever is talking about the plague spawn and how, you know, their new Bible will be written. And then before he can finish his thought, he gets shot in the head, and everybody of course turns around all shocked. And then Al Simmons Spawn says what he meant to say was, none of you will be alive to read a single page of it. And so he tells Jessica, all right, you put this group together, so you start leading it. She's like, yeah, gladly. So she has Medieval Spawn and Redeemer go in, because basically it kind of gives all of their positions, I guess, where it's saying Redeemer, and they don't really know who it is under the mask yet. So it says Redeemer slash unknown, air support, Medieval slash Mark Rosen, infantry, and then She Spawn slash Jessica Priest, black ops. So she kind of like sends them in first to kind of start like dealing with them, and then they continue fighting. Spawn goes over and grabs She Spawn's gun, saying like, I'm going to need to borrow this. So she's like, they continue all fighting and shit, and then it says he's been through enough wars to understand. You don't know if you've got a cohesive unit until they're on their own and under duress, which is going to be a little bit of a setup for what will be happening later on. Anyway, so he goes and he grabs this one chick, and he's like, I need to know, like, basically, is this thing, its own separate entity? And she says, yes, we're off the grid here. So he was like, okay, good. Then there's no one who's going to miss you. And then he shoots her in the face. So Medieval Spawn is in the back saying, like, was that needed? She may have been of some value. And then Jessica says, yeah, she could have given us intel. And then he just goes and gives her back the gun, tells her, go ahead and start cleaning up the place or whatever. She's like, clean the place up? She's like, why don't you do it yourself? She's like, why the hell would we even do that anyway? He's like, because this is going to be your new HQ. Like, welcome to your new base or whatever. Yeah, because this is going to be your new home. So She Spawn says to Medieval Spawn, like, well, I guess we just got evicted. We're not going to be going back to his headquarters because this is going to be our place from now on. So it says this is how the Black Fortress of the Scorched came to be. And then we see where Mark Rosen, this is Mark Rosen, if you've never seen him, like, this is the guy, the Medieval Spawn outside of his, like, armor and shit. He's the only one who's, like, cleaning up, and he even tells them, like, do you think you guys could possibly, like, I don't know, maybe help me out? So Redeemer was in the back telling She Spawn, like, yeah, I don't really know if this is going to work out for me, like, I only signed up to help out Spawn because he was going to provide me with what I've been looking for. So I don't really think I want to be a part of your outfit. I don't know if that's going to work out for me. And she says, you follow me, I'll get you what you want. Let's take a walk, Redeemer. So he's basically telling her, like, my concern with you is that you are the newest person to become a spawn, so you're not really, the most experienced at this. And she tells him, yeah, but that also gives me a certain amount of leverage, or allows me to move with autonomy. And he's like, well, what kind of autonomy? She says, I can recruit any soldiers needed for our missions, outside of Spawn's wishes or anyone else's. And he says, who's our? She says, I think I can get Medieval on board, and another. I was hoping you'd also be a part, but you should know, we'd be working outside of Al's wishes. So he just says, my goal is to find Reaper, and you were the last to see him. Help me with that, and I'll think about your offer. So Mark Rosen comes up, and he's basically saying, like, my helmet is vibrating again, so I'm just going to go ahead and toss it on and see what's going on with Medieval Spawn. So as soon as he's, like, summoned, he's saying, like, sacrifice. What you meant to say to Redeemer is that we've all had to sacrifice something. But no more. We've all suffered enough. This war, all this needs to stop. That is what we have at stake. He says, we all need to remember what we each lost. It was your child, Jessica, your future, Redeemer. For me, it was my humanity. So this is where we kind of cut from there and go over to Gunslinger Spawn, who you might recognize because he has his own special, like, solo series. And then we see where he's basically in this dilapidated church. There's this, like, just trail of dead wolves, which actually made me sad when I saw it, especially this wolf down here in the corner. I was like, he looks not only like he has the 1,000-yard stare, but he looks like he has PTSD and shit. Anyway, so it's kind of like talking about these three shadowy figures who are pursuing him, and saying that they're called Locust Rangers, and that they've been pursuing him for a while. They've been tracking Gunslinger for days, inflicting injuries to him with each encounter. Sometimes the Rangers shifted their forms, other times they just used their skills. Ultimately, they were able to drive him to this secluded church for what they believed would be his burial. So because they think, like, well, he's not that much of a threat right now, they send in one of the locusts who's basically just talking shit to him, saying, like, we know you're not a very strong spawn. Like, you can't continue this fight. You're not going to win. Like, you should just give up and shit. So he, like, crushes the damn thing, obviously. And then it says, if they think he's weak, now's the best time to face them. Head on. He peers out a side window, and then they're saying, like, you've got 10 seconds, and then he realizes, like, oh good, there's only 3 of them. So of course he comes out blasting and shit, ready to fight them. So we see where he's actually, he's not doing too bad. But then again, these things are kind of like made of locusts, so you're going to see how that's a bit of a problem in a second. He's basically saying, like, you boys ain't smart enough to be doing this on your own, and Cogliostro is too smart to have sent you. That leaves one question: who sent you? So it says, instead of answers, Gunslinger's flesh is torn, because one of them, like, sends out this razor sharp, like, barbed wire tendril, I guess you could call it, because it's coming from him. So he says, this is a war, boy, and your master, Spawn, is wasting time hunting an amateur cult instead of paying attention to bigger threats. It's laughable. And then we can see where the rest of them are kind of like just watching him and shit. And Redeemer is saying, like, he's failing. Should we go in and help him? But she says, no, it's okay. He loves doing this shit. Like, he's about to get the upper hand, to where we see, yeah, that's pretty much what's about to happen. So he's telling them, you've made a fatal mistake. I'm not here because of Spawn. I've got my own reasons. And I promise I'm more angry than he'll ever be, as he's, like, ripping the head off of one of them, or I guess the last one. So that's when they finally decide to come up and, like, start talking to him. And Jessica's saying, nice job. He's like, well, whatever you're here for, the answer's no. She says, Russia. Don't know if you've heard of it, but where? And he's like, I don't care. You see, these things ain't dead yet. I need to. And then as he say that, all of a sudden the locusts start, like, regrouping, as Medieval Spawn points out. So it's saying where they're basically all molding together into, like, a big ass body, into a whole that is much worse than its parts. And so we see it forms into this, talking about, like, sin will consume you and all this shit. So they're like, okay, yeah, we need to take this thing to hell down. So they all work together to bring it down. We see where Redeemer is basically the one who kind of, like, sets it on fire. That, like, sends it, like, toppling down. It says, especially the ones that have been warring their entire lives, these heroes' powers were honed long ago. Because it's talking about, like, teams, usually if they're made up of regular people, it takes a while for them to start working together. But since they're all basically soldiers, well, they were able to just start, working together pretty easily. It says, and the result of combining that firepower is staggering. So he, like I said, he falls down in flames and shit. And then Medieval Spawn's asking, are they dead this time? And Gunslinger's like, yeah, they are. He says, but we need to leave our mark. Send them all a clear message. So we see where the wolves, like, started eating them. And then he, like, waves at one of them, like, no, don't eat them. And we see where the wolf looks either very sad or very terrified by that, which I was like, oh. Anyway. So goes over to like set them on fire, like the whole thing on fire and shit like that. And then he says that if anyone wants to come after us, we'll burn every one of them. So Jessica's like, oh, okay, so then you're gonna join us. He's like, Spawn giving the orders. She's like, no, he knows nothing about this. He's like, all right, then let's go to Russia. And he says, by the way, I gave us a name they'll come to fear. So we can see where that's why they're called the Scorched. Basically, he came up with it and he burned it into the snow. So not bad, nice touch. And it's saying, that's how the Scorched came together, and this was basically the beginning of them like breaking apart was when they went to Russia. It says the question is why, and so we kind of get like this file thing talking about this one girl. What's her name? Odessa Turnev. An orphan from the eastern border, she and others have been staging protests throughout the country. Of late, she and her partner, Natasha Gorky, have gone into hiding. This is another thing. I need y'all. This is a company, right? I need y'all to have people who proofread this shit. Or, as I've said before, I'll do it. Because it says, if you notice the third to last line, it says that they have gone into in hiding. And this is not the last time that there's a fuck up like that I'm like, this was so easily avoidable. Anyway, it says the Russian army is fanning the city looking for their location. And then we see where they're just kind of giving us some more info on like the plague spawn, the military presence, Colonel Khrushchev, talking about how he's a 32-year career with the Kremlin, oversaw massacres in Afghanistan and Iraq during covert missions throughout the Eastern Bloc, proponent of exploring all possibilities of weaponry, known for his ruthlessness. So that's where we go over to Russia, where there's this like group of women who are all kind of like sleeping together when all of a sudden the military busts in. And it's even asking like, why would the military be coming after, these women then when they're very obviously like outcasts from society, just trying to get through to the next day? Like what threat could they possibly be posing, right? And we see where they're using extreme prejudice against these bitches. Anyway, so two of them run away, and then it's like asking like, or are they? Is that all that they are? So we see where these two are running, and they're saying like, we can't outrun them or whatever. She's like, well, we have to. So they're trying to get away, and it's also explaining how, I mean, obviously no one's going to come out and help them because they're being pursued by government forces, and people here or under any extremist type of government is going to be afraid to actually speak up and help people because they know it's just not worth it to be a witness when you're being pursued by the government and there's nothing that you can actually do. There's no point in even being a witness to it. So everybody just stays inside, stays away from the windows, tries to pretend like nothing is happening. So they get pursued into an alley, and then all of a sudden the soldiers start turning into fucking werewolves, talking about like, yeah, we're supposed to bring you back alive, but they did say that we could bring you back scarred, so we're gonna hurt you a little bit. Anyway, they go to like leap at the girls, and then all of a sudden they are beset upon by the team of spawns and a redeemer. So they just get like torn the fuck apart. And I'm gonna say this is actually a pretty nice splash page. I'm not gonna lie. I did kind of like this. It was pretty cool. Anyway, so it says the intel they've been given is horribly wrong. Hellspawns are supposed to work alone. Never in their history have any of them ever banded together for a common cause until now. So yeah, like I said, they just continue just to wreck shop on them and shit. So they managed to subdue the threat, and then they're all kind of like standing around like, okay, now we need to get more answers. This carnage, what was it for? Asks Medieval Spawn. And then She Spawn says, if Redeemer and I are right, then Reaper is in danger from a dozen factions who'll do anything to strip his powers. So that's where Medieval Spawn's like asking, okay, so then why the side mission? Like, why didn't we just go directly over there? She says, we can't, not that easily. To wipe out a horde of God's angels, we need a bomb to blow through them. Plague Spawn is a bomb. So that's where Gunslinger's like, oh, okay, so you're looking for Plague Spawn? Fine, we'll get answers about where he's at. He goes to one of the werewolves and he asks him like, hey, where's the Plague Spawn? And then when the wolf doesn't answer, he's like, well, I guess he doesn't know. So he literally does this shit where he rips the top of his head like back. I don't know if he ripped it all the way off, but he ripped it back enough to where it's like, yeah, he's dead. So Redeemer's asking him like, what the hell are you doing? And he's like, I'm getting answers. So he goes over to the next one, and then he asks him again, or he asks him the question again, where he says, what do you know about Plague Spawn? He's like, I guess nothing. So he does the same thing. He like snaps his head and shit. So he goes to one of the guys who looks regular, but we're going to find out in a second he's not. He goes and puts his hands in his mouth. He's like, well, I guess you're next. So the dude stops him. He's like, no, don't do it. So he's like, all right, what do you know? So he basically tells him that Plague Spawn is the black one that looks like you. He is one click south at General Khrushchev's base. It's where he created all of us. He's trying to bond with it. And Gunslinger's like, oh, okay, great. That's all I needed to know. And then he shoots him in the head. So, of course, we see She Spawn looking just terror or horrified. And then he says, we've got what we need. Let's go. And then Redeemer tries to tell him, well, that's not how we work. And then he's like, oh, yeah, we'll get used to it. And then he gives a pistol to Medieval Spawn. He's like, you're going to need more than armor. So he goes over to the girls. He's like, that brings me to you two. And she's one tries to tell him, like, just leave them alone. He's like, no, I need to know because, there were 60 soldiers trying to pursue y'all. Why would they send that much firepower and manpower after y'all? What's so special about you? But all of a sudden, she's comes up and kicks the shit out of him. She's like, leave them alone. Like, they're obviously already, like, scared enough as it is. We don't need to be interrogating them like this. It was like, calm down, like, I know what I'm doing, I'm just trying to see something. And basically he points at the dead guy that he just shot in the head, telling him, like, do you think that these people are normal? And then he like uses his magic to show, like, yeah, that one was a werewolf too, so I don't really know what the hell these chicks are either. He says, your instincts don't get better. That could be a problem for all of us. And Medieval Spawn says she's new to this, like we all were at one point. He says, so take your gun and fall back. And we see where he like bent the gun and shit, and he's like shoving it back at Gunslinger. So Jessica decides, well, let me go ahead and turn back into my normal appearance, so that way I'm not scaring them anymore. And then Medieval Spawn offers his cape and says, here, cover them, like it'll warm them and all that. So that brings us back to the intro, where they're all in the building trying to keep the girls warm and everything, and just waiting to see what they're going to do next. And it says, maps set the staging while she conveys the role each of them will play in their upcoming mission. And we see Gunslingers like getting bored. Anyway, it says that her hardest part, though, may be trying to get all of them to buy into the concept of waiting. If they can buy time until it's to their advantage, then this unsanctioned trip to Russia will not have been in vain. Given these are seasoned warriors, she hopes they'll come to that same conclusion, because they've all learned the hard way at times that half your fighting happens off the field. So he's saying our enemies must know we're coming after them. Why are we waiting? Why give them time to fortify? To which Medieval says, because despite your impatience, this will be a two-pronged assault. Having a majority in one place means they'll be unbalanced. So he says, for now, don't jeopardize what the rest of us are after. And then he goes up to the girls and like, please don't hurt us. He's like, no, 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 that's not what I'm here to do. Like, I'm trying to help you if you will let me. So he's like, if you just touch my hand, I'll be able to see everything you've been through. So she does that, and then he starts, it says, writing through her mind, where he sees that basically she was an orphan, she's alone, and then in a city that cares little what happens to its women. So I mean, yeah, you kind of figured that would be the case. Anyway, we see where she got busted out and joined like this network of runaways and shit like that. And it says that, so those like her band together like a large punk band. And I was like, oh, I see what parallels you're trying to draw here. Anyway, it says fighting for a sliver of decency. And then we see where she ran afoul of one of the military officials who's like berating her in public, saying like, do you not realize that I could literally kill you in broad daylight in front of all of these people and no one's going to say a word? That is absolute power. And then he slaps the shit out of her. And then we see where it's saying like, sometimes it just like takes a spark to get people like moving, but sometimes that spark ignites an inferno, where we see that basically all of these people rose up against them and started beating the shit out of all of them, and they use that opportunity to run away. So they run into the woods and come across, well, she's looking at this rabbit, but basically they come across this secret military facility and everything, where there's like one of these soldiers like, you there, these labs are private, why are you here? So again, she tries to run away all scared. But then all of a sudden he gets killed from behind like this and shit. So she sees what it was that killed him, and yeah, it was the plague spawn. So like was mentioned, there's trying to do like some research on it, trying to, get what they can out of it, but apparently it's not going all that well. Anyway, so it says she saw him and where they had tried to imprison him. What none of them knew was that this thing was the original prototype for Hell's Spawn uniform, but it had too many defects. It was supposed to be destroyed. Instead, it survived. And that's where Medieval and Odessa's mind meld suddenly ends. So he's asking her like, okay, can you show me like where that was that happened? She says, yeah, I think so. And this is where I was talking about that other spelling error, when Gunslinger's like, hey, did you hear that? And here is misspelled. That's the wrong here. It's exhausting. Anyway, so that's where they hear, like, the people coming outside. And like I said, this is basically takes us back to the beginning where she says, Redeemer, I need you to go scout. And he's like, okay, yeah, we need to come up with a plan, because yeah, we're not going to be able to fight against that. And it looks like, a lot of people are about to get slaughtered and shit like that. So it says that may already be too late. So that's where we leave off on that for right now. But there is an epilogue where we see Al Simmons standing there with Terry, and they're kind of talking, and Terry's basically asking, like, aren't you going to go help them or something like that? About an hour ago, what do you want to do about it? He's like, nothing for now. He says, so you're going to let them fail? He says, I'm going to test them. They made this mess. It's their job to clean it up. He's asking, okay, so to what end? He says, to see if they're capable or just reckless. I don't need rogue soldiers. To which Terry tells him, like, well, I'm pretty sure there were a bunch of our commanding officers who would have said the exact same about us. He says, and what if they don't meet your standards? He's like, well, then I made a mistake in trusting any of them. He says, so you're going to fight everyone on your own? You're absurd. And Spawn tells him, I'm not going into any battle if those fighting with me can't protect my flanks. I can't afford being distracted worrying about them. They need to figure things out for all our sakes. And that's where it basically leaves off, where we can see that Jessica is still, like, protecting one of the girls. So we're going to see what comes from that. Pretty interesting overall. Like I said, I do like this, where this whole Spawn universe is going. I find it very interesting myself. I've always loved stuff like this anyway. Like I've mentioned many times on my channel, I enjoy things having to do with magic and the supernatural and things like that. Like this whole thing, and I've loved Spawn since I was a kid. So I mean, all of it just kind of comes together very well for me. You know what I mean? I mean, I understand it might not be for everybody, but it does seem to be for a lot of people, because these books do sell a lot. Like, I go to my comic book shop and they have, like, I'm talking multiple stacks, like big ass stacks of Spawn stuff. And I always think to myself, like, do they really expect to sell all of that? But it seems like they do, because I mean, I go back the next week and they may have, like, I don't know, 5, 6 copies left of the book. So I'm like, I guess y'all did sell. Not bad. It might just be to people who are like speculators and shit, who come in and like pick up multiple copies of the book. That could also definitely be a thing. But hey, as long as they're selling, they're making their money. I'm not going to complain about who's buying it or why. All that matters is that the shit sold. That's all we need to happen, right? So, because I want these businesses to stay in business, that's what matters to me. I want to get to the point where eventually I'll see other stuff that I want to see in stores, not just on Indiegogo. I want to see, like, Comicsgate stuff get into stores. So I need those stores to still exist, so that way I can actually see that. So fingers crossed that they're able to stick around long enough for this to become big enough to get to that point, because that's what I want to see. But enough rambling about all of that. If anybody picked this up, if you read this, feel free to let me know about it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. As I always say, if you enjoyed the video, then make sure you hit the like, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you have the notification bell hits. That way you know when there is new content coming for you. And if you're done here, then go and read a book, possibly this one, if it's your type of thing. And if not, then I'll see you on my next video.